The air in the living room was thick with the sweet scent of vanilla cake and baby powder, a joyful perfume that clung to the pastel-colored balloons and delicate paper streamers. Sunlight streamed through the large bay window, illuminating the happy faces of friends and family who had gathered to celebrate the impending arrival of my second child, my baby shower. It was supposed to be a perfect day, a bubble of pure, unadulterated happiness. I sat in the center of the room on a chair that had been affectionately decorated to look like a throne, a mountain of beautifully wrapped gifts at my feet. My hand rested instinctively on the curve of my belly, a gesture that had become second nature over the past months. Inside, my little one kicked, a gentle reminder of the new life I was nurturing. My first son, Leo, who was now a boisterous 3-year-old, had been a challenging baby. He suffered from colic, a relentless, inconsolable crying that had tested the very limits of my endurance and my husband Mark's. The sleepless nights had felt endless, the exhaustion a physical weight that settled deep in my bones. But we had made it through, and Leo had blossomed into a bright, funny, and deeply loving little boy. The memory of those difficult months, however, still cast a long shadow, a quiet fear that whispered to me in the dead of night. Would this baby be the same? I tried to push the thought away as I reached for another gift, a small, elegantly wrapped box. It was from my sister-in-law, Megan. She was sitting across from me, a tight, unreadable smile on her face. Megan and I had always had a strained relationship. She was my husband's younger sister, and our personalities were like oil and water. Where I was a planner, she was spontaneous to the point of being reckless. Where I valued quiet evenings at home, she thrived on drama and attention. Still, she was family, and for Mark's sake, I always made an effort. I carefully untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in soft tissue paper, was a state-of-the-art sound machine, one of those expensive models that promised to mimic the sounds of the womb and guarantee a peaceful night's sleep. It was a thoughtful gift, surprisingly so. "Oh, Megan, thank you," I said, my voice genuine with appreciation. "This is amazing. I've read such good things about these." I held it up for everyone to see, and a chorus of appreciative murmurs filled the room. Megan's smile widened, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She leaned forward, her voice just loud enough to cut through the gentle chatter. "Well," she began, a theatrical sigh in her tone, "I just thought you might need it. Let's just hope this one doesn't cry as much as the last one." The words dropped into the joyful atmosphere like stones into a calm pond. A sudden, sharp silence fell over the room. The happy chatter ceased, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable tension. I saw my mother flinch, and my best friend Chloe shot Megan a look of pure venom. My own smile froze on my face, the blood draining from my cheeks. It felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. The comment was not just a comment. It was a public judgment, a dismissal of the hardest months of my life, thrown at me in a room full of people who were there to celebrate me. The hurt was immediate and sharp, a physical blow to the chest. She had taken a private, painful memory and turned it into a casual, cruel jab. I could feel the sting of tears behind my eyes, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I took a slow, deliberate breath, forcing a brittle smile back onto my lips. "Well, all babies are different, aren't they?" I said, my voice miraculously steady. "But the sound machine is a wonderful thought. Thank you, really." I placed the gift aside, my hands trembling slightly. The conversation in the room slowly, awkwardly started up again, but the bubble of perfect happiness had been burst. The sunlight no longer seemed as bright, the cake's aroma no longer as sweet. Megan sat back in her chair looking smug, as if she had just delivered the winning line in a play. Her husband, David, who sat beside her, had the decency to look uncomfortable. He avoided my gaze, shifting in his seat and staring intently at the floor. The moment passed, but it lingered, a dark stain on an otherwise beautiful day, a harbinger of the storm that was yet to come. The rest of the baby shower passed in a blur of forced smiles and polite conversation. I went through the motions, opening the remaining gifts with feigned enthusiasm, but the joy had been irrevocably tainted. Megan's words echoed in my mind, a cruel and constant refrain. Mark, my husband, had been furious. As soon as we were alone that evening, amidst the scattered wrapping paper and deflating balloons, he had paced the living room, his jaw tight with anger. "I'm going to talk to her," he'd said, his voice low and dangerous. "She can't speak to you like that." I had talked him down, not because I didn't appreciate his loyalty, but because I knew it would only create more drama. A confrontation would give Megan exactly what she craved: attention and conflict. "Let it go," I had sighed, leaning my head back against the sofa, exhausted. "It's not worth it." But it was worth something. It was a debt of cruelty that I mentally filed away, an emotional invoice left unpaid. 6 weeks later, I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl we named Lily. And as if in direct defiance of Megan's spiteful hope, Lily was the calmest baby I had ever known. She slept soundly, nursed quietly, and her cries were soft coos of need rather than the frantic, desperate wails that had defined Leo's first few months. The expensive sound machine Megan had gifted me sat unused on the dresser, a silent, ironic monument to her meanness. The quiet, peaceful nights with Lily were a healing balm on the still tender wound of Megan's comment. It felt like a small, private victory, a secret I savored in the quiet pre-dawn hours as I rocked my daughter back to sleep. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, about a month after Lily was born, that David called. I was folding a mountain of tiny baby clothes on the sofa while Lily napped in her bassinet beside me. His name flashing on my phone screen was unusual. He rarely called, and any communication from that side of the family usually came from Megan. "Sarah? Hi, it's David," he said, his voice hesitant. "Is this a bad time?" "Hi, David. No, not at all. Lily's asleep. Is everything okay?" I asked, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach. "Yeah, everything's fine. Well, actually, I was wondering if I could maybe stop by for a few minutes. There's something I need to talk to you about." He paused, then added quickly, "Preferably when Mark isn't home. It's a private matter." The request was bizarre and immediately set off alarm bells. My mind raced through a dozen disastrous scenarios, each one more dramatic than the last. Was he leaving Megan? Had something happened to her? "Okay," I said slowly, my curiosity now warring with my unease. "Mark's at the office until 6. You can come by now if you like." "Great. Thanks, Sarah. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived looking haggard. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usually neat hair was disheveled. He carried a strained, anxious energy that filled my calm living room like a toxic gas. He awkwardly accepted the cup of coffee I offered, his hands trembling slightly as he took the mug. He sat on the edge of the armchair opposite me, avoiding my eyes, his gaze darting around the room before finally settling on the sleeping form of my daughter. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "She looks so peaceful." "She is," I replied, my tone neutral. "We're very lucky. She's a very calm baby." The words hung in the air between us, a direct, unspoken reference to his wife's comment at the shower. A faint flush of red crept up his neck. "Yeah," he mumbled, looking down at his coffee. "Listen, Sarah, about what Megan said that day. I'm so sorry. She just says things without thinking. She doesn't mean it, doesn't she?" I asked, my voice cool. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. He looked up, and for the first time, I saw the raw desperation in his eyes. "No," he admitted, shaking his head. "Sometimes she does, but she's been under a lot of stress." He took a deep, shaky breath, and then the real reason for his visit came tumbling out. He and Megan were in serious financial trouble. He had been laid off from his accounting job 2 months ago and hadn't found anything else. Megan, oblivious or uncaring, had continued her extravagant spending habits. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, a weekend trip to a spa that he hadn't known about until he saw the credit card statement. They were drowning in debt, behind on their mortgage, and the bill collectors were calling constantly. I listened in stunned silence, my mind reeling. The smug, perfectly put-together facade they presented to the world was a complete illusion. Then came the final, devastating blow. "Sarah," he said, his voice cracking with shame, "I came here to ask you for a loan. A big one. We need $20,000 to keep from losing the house." $20,000. The number was so large, so audacious, it took my breath away. He was asking me, the woman his wife had publicly shamed and insulted, to bail them out of a hole they had dug for themselves. My gaze drifted from David's desperate, pleading face to my sleeping daughter, so peaceful and innocent. The injustice of it all washed over me in a furious wave. The woman who had wished my child to be a source of pain and exhaustion now needed my help to maintain her own comfortable, careless life. The silence stretched, thick and heavy with unspoken history. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, pity, and disbelief, and in that moment I knew that whatever I decided, it would change our family forever. $20,000. The number echoed in the quiet room, a demand so audacious it was almost comical. I stared at David, at his crumpled posture and the pleading look in his eyes, and a cold, hard anger began to crystallize in my chest. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle, the sheer, unmitigated gall of it all. He sat in my home, a home that Mark and I had worked tirelessly for, a home where we had carefully planned and saved for our children's future, and asked me to sacrifice a piece of that security to rescue his wife from her own reckless choices. The wife who had stood in this very room and casually wished suffering upon my unborn child. My gaze drifted to the unused sound machine on the dresser. It was a perfect, expensive symbol of their hypocrisy. A gift meant as a backhanded insult, a prediction of hardship, purchased with money they didn't have. They were drowning in debt, yet Megan had felt entitled to spend over $100 on a passive-aggressive present. The thought was infuriating. My mind flashed back to the long, lonely nights with Leo, the feeling of utter desperation as his cries echoed through the house. Megan's words at the shower weren't just an insult. They were a violation of that memory, a belittling of a struggle she couldn't possibly comprehend. I took a slow, deliberate breath, the same way I had at the shower, gathering my composure like a shield. "David," I began, my voice dangerously calm. "Let me see if I understand this correctly. You are in my house, asking me for a loan the size of a down payment on a small home, because your wife, who has a penchant for designer clothes and spa weekends, has spent you into a hole. The same wife who, just a few months ago, made a public spectacle of hoping my new baby would be as difficult as my first." The color drained from David's face. He visibly flinched as if I had physically struck him. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He just stared at me, his shame a palpable force in the room. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not insulted," I continued, leaning forward. "Not just by this request, but by everything that led to it. Do you have any idea how hurtful that was, David? To have someone, a family member, use my past struggles as a punchline at my own baby shower?" "I know," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I know, Sarah. And I am so, so sorry." I told her it was a horrible thing to say. We fought about it for days. "And yet here you are," I pressed on, relentless, "asking me to clean up the mess. Where is Megan, by the way? Why isn't she here, asking me herself? Is she too proud? Or did she think I'd be an easier target?" He looked down at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. "She doesn't know I'm here," he admitted, the confession barely audible. "She'd kill me if she knew. Her pride, it wouldn't let her ask. She thinks we can just, I don't know, get another credit card or something. She's not living in reality. But we're going to lose the house, Sarah. The foreclosure notice came last week. I'm desperate." The confession hung in the air, heavy and pathetic. Megan didn't even know. She was off in her fantasy world of limitless credit while her husband was here, begging for a lifeline from the woman she scorned. A part of me, a dark and vindictive part, felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The facade was crumbling, and the reality was uglier than I could have imagined. But seeing the genuine despair etched on David's face, I also felt a flicker of pity. He was trapped by his wife's arrogance and his own weakness in enabling her for so long. He was not his wife. He had always been kind, if quiet and passive. He was the one who looked uncomfortable when Megan made her cruel jokes, the one who tried to smooth things over in her destructive wake. But he was also the one who had allowed it to get to this point. "David, $20,000 is not a small amount of money," I said, my tone softening slightly, shifting from anger to practicality. "That's money Mark and I have set aside for our children, for their education. It's not just sitting in a checking account, waiting to be spent." "I know," he pleaded, his eyes welling up with tears. It was startling to see him so broken. "I'll pay you back, I swear. Every penny, with interest. I'm looking for a job. I'm interviewing everywhere. I'll take anything. I can't let my family be homeless. Whatever you think of Megan, please don't let that happen." His desperation was a stark contrast to Megan's smug superiority. The image of her smiling face at the shower flashed in my mind again, and my resolve hardened. This wasn't just my decision to make. This was Mark's money too. This was our family's money. I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "I can't give you an answer right now, David. This is something I have to discuss with Mark. It's a massive decision, and I won't make it without him." A flicker of hope, fragile but real, appeared in his eyes. "Of course," he said, scrambling to his feet. "Of course I understand. Just, will you talk to him? Soon?" "I'll talk to him tonight," I promised. I walked him to the door, the air between us thick with unspoken words. As he stepped out onto the porch, he turned back to me, his face a mask of misery. "Thank you, Sarah," he said quietly, "for even considering it." I just nodded and closed the door. I leaned against it, my heart pounding in my chest. The quiet of my house, once a source of peace, now felt like the calm in the eye of a hurricane. I looked at Lily, still sleeping soundly, completely unaware of the financial and emotional chaos that was swirling around our family. Megan's wish had, in a twisted way, come true after all. My new baby was calm, but my life was now anything but. The moment Mark walked through the door that evening, he knew something was wrong. The usual warmth of our home felt charged, heavy with an anxious energy. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a cold, untouched cup of tea in front of me, and the look on my face must have told him everything. He dropped his keys on the counter, his brow furrowing with concern. "Sarah? What is it? Is it Lily? Is Leo okay?" "The kids are fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "They're sleeping." "It's not them. David came to see me today." Mark's posture stiffened. A wary, guarded expression replaced his concern. "David? What did he want? Is Megan causing problems again?" I took a deep breath and recounted the entire sordid story. I told him about David's haggard appearance, his confession of unemployment, the mountain of debt, and Megan's oblivious spending. As I spoke, Mark's face grew darker and darker, his hands clenching into tight fists on the kitchen counter. When I finally got to the part about the $20,000 loan, he exploded. "Absolutely not," he snarled, his voice a low, furious growl. "Not a chance in hell. The nerve, the absolute unmitigated nerve of that man to come into our house and ask for that kind of money after what his wife did." He began to pace the kitchen, his movements sharp and angry, a mirror of his reaction after the baby shower. Is he insane? Does he think we're a bank? Or just a pair of fools? $20,000? That's Lily's college fund. That's a new roof for this house. That's our emergency savings. And for what? To fund Megan's shopping addiction? To put a Band-Aid on a gaping wound they inflicted on themselves? No, not a chance. His anger was a shield for me, a validation of my own feelings. I let him vent, knowing he needed to release the initial wave of fury. He was right, of course. Every logical part of my brain screamed that giving them the money was a catastrophic mistake. It would be rewarding the worst kind of behavior. It would be setting a precedent that we were the family fixers, the safety net for their irresponsibility. "She doesn't even know he was here," I said quietly into the storm of his anger. That stopped him in his tracks. He turned to face me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and contempt. "What? You're kidding me." He said she would kill him if she knew. She thinks they can just get another credit card. He says she's not living in reality and the foreclosure notice has already arrived. Mark let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Oh, that's rich. That is just perfect. So Megan gets to maintain her pride and her delusions, while her husband goes around begging from the people she insults. This just gets better and better." He ran a hand through his hair, the anger simmering down into a hard, frustrated resentment. "So what did you tell him?" "I told him I couldn't give him an answer," I said. "I told him I had to talk to you first." He came over and sat down at the table across from me, his eyes softening as he looked at my face. "Good," he said, his voice calmer now. "We're in this together. And the answer is no. It has to be." I looked at him, my own conflict churning inside me. "I know," I said. But when I saw his face, Mark, he was broken. He was crying. He was talking about his family being homeless. I hate what Megan did. I truly do. But can we live with ourselves if we let them go under? If we just stand by and watch them lose their house? This was the question that had been tormenting me since David left. It was one thing to feel righteous anger, and another to be the catalyst for a family member's complete ruin. Mark was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on the table. He understood the dilemma. We weren't cruel people. We were builders, planners, protectors. The idea of deliberately letting someone's life implode, even someone who had wronged us, felt alien. "It's not our fault, Sarah," he said. But his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "They did this to themselves." "I know," I repeated. "But doing nothing feels wrong. It feels like a different kind of cruelty." We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, the weight of the decision pressing down on us. This was the dark side of family, an obligation you felt even when you didn't want to, a connection that could drag you into a mess you didn't create. Finally, Mark took my hand across the table. His jaw was set, his expression grim. He had come to a decision. "Okay," he said, his voice firm. "We're not going to give them $20,000. That's off the table. A handout that size won't solve their problems. It will only postpone them. It will enable Megan and absolve her of any responsibility." I waited, knowing there was more. But, he continued, we won't let them become homeless. That's a line we won't cross. So here's what we're going to do. This is not a gift. It's a bailout. And it comes with strict, non-negotiable conditions. He stood up, the planner in him taking over, his energy shifting from anger to action. First, we are not giving them a cent until we have a face-to-face meeting with both of them. Megan has to be there. She has to be told the truth about everything, and she has to be the one to ask for our help. No more hiding. Second, they have to agree, in writing, to attend financial counseling. I'll find the service, I'll even pay for the first few sessions. They need professional help to break this cycle. Third, this is a formal legal loan. We'll have a lawyer draft a document with a clear repayment schedule and interest. We're not a bank, but we'll act like one. Finally, we won't give them cash. If we agree to help, we will pay the mortgage company directly to bring them current. That way, we know exactly where the money is going. It was a brilliant, logical, and emotionally intelligent plan. It offered help but demanded accountability. It protected us while forcing them to confront the reality of their situation. It was a lifeline, not a blank check. It was a path forward that wasn't paved with resentment or enablement. Megan has to ask us for the help herself, I repeated, the significance of that one condition settling in. For the proud, arrogant Megan, that would be a punishment worse than any financial hardship. It would be the ultimate humiliation. Exactly, Mark said, his eyes hard. She made the wound. Now she's going to have to be the one to ask for the bandage. He looked at me, his expression serious. Do you agree with this plan? All of it? I thought of David's desperate face. I thought of Megan's smug smile. And I thought of the justice in Mark's conditions. It was fair. It was firm. It was the right thing to do. I nodded. I agree. All of it. The decision was made. The hurricane was about to make landfall, and our quiet, peaceful life was about to be at the very center of the storm. The only question now was whether David would have the courage to tell his wife, and whether Megan's pride was worth more to her than her own home. 2 nights later, they sat on our sofa, the air thick with tension. Megan was a statue of defiance, her posture rigid. David just looked exhausted. Mark didn't waste time. We're willing to help, he began, his voice firm and clear, but not without conditions. This will be a formal legal loan with a repayment schedule. You will both attend financial counseling, and any money from us will go directly to the bank to clear the arrears. He paused, his gaze landing squarely on his sister. Finally, Megan, you have to be the one to ask for the help. We need to hear it from you. Megan's composure shattered. You're joking, she spat, her eyes blazing with fury as she turned to me. This is your doing, isn't it? A little revenge for a harmless comment? This isn't revenge, Megan, I replied, my voice steady. It's accountability. You can't expect to insult people and then ask them to bail you out without consequence. I would rather lose the house, she hissed. Then we will lose it, David suddenly cried out, his voice cracking. Tears streamed down his face as he stared at his wife. It's over, Megan. There's no more money. We will be homeless in 2 weeks. Is your pride worth more than a roof over our heads? His raw desperation finally broke through her wall of anger. The fight drained from her face, leaving only a bleak, hollow defeat. She stared at the floor, her body slumping. After a long, heavy silence, she finally whispered the words, so quiet they were almost lost in the room. Will you help us? It wasn't an apology, but it was enough. Mark simply nodded. Yes, we will. The aftermath was clinical. We had our lawyer draft the documents, and we paid the bank directly. Their lives stabilized, but our family dynamic was forever changed. The relationship became transactional, defined by monthly loan payments and a polite, formal distance. There were no more smug remarks from her, and no more silent resentment from me. In saving them from foreclosure, we had also saved ourselves from a toxic cycle. We drew a necessary boundary, proving that true help isn't just giving, but also demanding accountability. It was a cold, difficult peace, but it was peace nonetheless, built on the hard-won foundation of respect. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a message about the strength it takes to set boundaries. It's a reminder that sometimes the most compassionate act is to demand accountability, not just for others, but for our own peace.